Hi, I'm Jasmine. Today's episode of Unless the podcast is really special. It is Mother's Day. We are honoring all the amazing moms, grandmas, mummies, and other mother figures who take care of everyone else, even when no one is looking. Our guest is someone really close to our family, Laurie Fritz. She was my mom's host mother when she came to the U.S. as a teenager, and she has been an important part of our family ever since. This episode is a tribute to the everyday heroes we call Mom. Thank you and happy Mother's Day. Hi, Eva. Happy Mother's Day. This episode is for all the moms who make snacks, fix everything, give hugs, and love really big. Lori is one of those moms and grandmas, and she is really cool. She even wants to be on Jeopardy! We hope you love this episode as much as we love our mom.
Hello and welcome to Unless the Podcast. I am Dr. Hemma Lomax and it's our Mother's Day edition. I couldn't think of a better guest than the woman who opened her home and heart to me when I was just a teenager arriving to the US from the UK for a high school exchange program. Laurie Chevalier Fritz is a biological mother of four, a grandmother, a daughter, a sister, a host to students from around the world, and she is the heart of her family and her community. She's a military wife who held the home front while her husband served long submarine deployments in the Navy. A young mum who grew into a wise and deeply rooted matriarch. A woman who has shown up in seasons of joy and in times of deep challenge, including recently as she's helped care for her father after a serious hospitalization, working alongside her two sisters to support both parents with love and devotion. Laurie is also an avid reader and historian, a passionate community activist, and someone who never stops learning or caring. You'll hear that she even has a lifelong dream of competing on Jeopardy! Today, we walk through her heroine's journey, not just as a mother, but as someone who models what it means to care a whole awful lot. So, wherever you are, I invite you to settle in and listen to this tribute to Laurie and to mothers, grandmothers, caregivers, and caretakers everywhere. This is Unless the Podcast. And Laurie, welcome to this Mother's Day special of Unless the Podcast.
Good morning, Ham. I love you.
I love you too, Laurie. I'm so grateful that you would join me today for this ultra special edition about mothers and how mothers are really the focal point of caring in the world. And so when I thought about the Mother's Day edition, I thought, who better to have as a guest than my host mum, the meme to my children, and someone that's been in my life, gosh, I don't know, I shouldn't age myself now, but I think we're going on to 30 years that we've known each other.
Yep.
Yes,
We were
yes.
figuring that out last night. You came in 1992 to us, right
There we
after Nancy
go.
was born.
There we go, 1992, and that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and you've been part of my family ever since. So this episode is really a love letter to that and to the kind of motherhood that transcends biology. We're going to talk about your biological motherhood as well, of course, but you've also been a mother to many in so many ways. And we're going to talk about the courage, creativity, caretaking community that you build. So thank you, Laurie, for joining me, and welcome.
I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored that you thought of me for this.
Well, I did. And I really wanted to take our listeners through, some of our experiences together, but really just your own heroine's journey in terms of your early call to motherhood and then how that principle of motherhood has really permeated your life. And so maybe we'll start with your origin story, Laurie. Why don't I have you introduce yourself to our guests in your own way, and then we'll get to your story.
Well, I'm the oldest of three girls and originally from New Jersey. We moved to South Florida in 1969. And I was raised by wonderful, strong women. My mother and my meme and my grandmother were all strong women that didn't let life get them down too much. And I guess I inherited a lot of that from them. I became a mother very young because I was a teenager and knew better than everybody else. So I got married the first time between my junior and senior year of high school. And then I had my first son about 3 months after I graduated from high school. And my mother was very helpful to me, but that marriage didn't end up lasting. And so now I had a son, and then I found another mistake later along the line, and that marriage didn't work. But I got another son out of the deal. And then it was not always easy being a single mother. I was lucky to have the support of both of my parents who helped me out and let me and the kids move back in when I needed help. So they set a very good example for me. And then I met Mark, my present husband. We're going on 38 years of marriage. And I have two beautiful children with him, Alex and Nancy. And I've learned boys can be easier than girls in some things, and girls can be harder than boys in other things. And each child is individual. I had somebody ask me one time, well, who's your favorite child? I always hated when people said that. I said, I don't have a favorite because I love each of them individually for who they are. And we each have our own individual relationships with each other that are not necessarily the same as the relationships that I have with my other children because they're different people.
And isn't that the magic, really, Laurie, of motherhood, that we as recipients of that love get to feel the individual care and attention? I think that's such an important point that you make, that yes, in any one day you may be happier with one child over another.
Yeah, there definitely is that. And then I've always seemed to my mother used to call me Dear Abby when I was in high school because everybody always seemed to bring their problems to me for solving. I'm not sure why, but I was better at solving other people's problems than my own at some points in time. But I've always tried to embrace being kind, teaching my family to be kind, and embracing all the differences that we have as individuals, as citizens of the world. When we first decided to get an exchange student, which was the one before you, Klaus, the main reason that we did it, besides the fact that he was from Denmark and my husband's first wife was from Denmark, so he spoke some Danish and we thought that would be helpful. We wanted to get him because my oldest son, Jake, was very much, we're Americans and we know better than everybody else in the world and we do everything better than everybody. We thought that maybe he needed a little experience with people from other areas. So we got a boy his age from Denmark so that he could realize that there's other perspectives in the world than just his and or the American one. And that worked out well. But I was pregnant with my daughter when he was there, and my husband was out to sea most of the time on submarines. And it was a good experience, but I didn't think we were going to get another one because I was having a baby. And then I heard about you, and the family that you were supposed to go with fell through, and they asked if you could come and stay with us for a while. And of course, I wasn't going to leave you with no place to live. And then the most wonderful thing happened. You turned out to be the most incredible gift that I could be given, as far as an extra daughter, and the friendship that we developed and the love that we had. And there's always more love to go around. It doesn't have to be portioned out. Somebody extra comes for dinner, you throw in a little more spaghetti. You adapt. And I think that adaptation is a very important part of motherhood. I was always a planner, and I didn't like it when my plans went awry. And now that I've gotten older, I just switch gears and adapt. It doesn't do you any good to get upset about it. You just have to figure out, okay, this way didn't work. What can I do that'll fix it? And it certainly has made my life less stressful, becoming more adaptable. We also, after we had you, we moved to Japan for a while. We lived there through the Navy, and that was a wonderful experience. I met a lot of wonderful people from Japan and got to see and do things I would have never had an opportunity to. And you even came and visited
I
us when
did.
we were in Japan, and that was wonderful. And then when we got back, we decided to get a Japanese exchange student since we had lived there. And so we had Shin, and he stayed with us for a while. And that was very interesting. And he was a great guy. And then we also had, over the next few years, we had Nevina. She was from Serbia. And then we also had Hana from Ukraine. And I don't get to keep up with them as well as I keep up with you, but we do send each other messages and cards and things like that. And it's been such a joy watching all of you grow and have your families and do be the next generation to bring kindness and goodness to the world.
Well, I love
And
that you mentioned that, Laurie, because I mean, firstly, there's so much to unpack there with your global family, and this is why I said you only have four biological children, because clearly your motherhood expands way beyond those you gave birth to, and we'll talk more about that. But you're right about that kindness in the world piece, because we had wonderful role models in our parents and in you, and I think we don't want to brush over how important it is to be that for the next generation. Where did you get clarity on that, Laurie? I mean, you do it so effortlessly and you do it so magnificently. I want to give more examples of that in a moment, but how did you get clarity on that was the way to show up in the world? Keep your arms open, another chair at your table for anyone that would come for a meal or for a hug.
well, especially with all the hubbub and stuff that's going on in the world right now, it just seems to always go back to the golden rule, which in every philosophy and religion, that's the basis of do unto others as you would have others do unto you. It's so simple, and I don't understand why people don't get it. If you want to be treated well, you want to be taken care of, you want somebody to care about you, well, care about other people. Call it karma or whatever, but I truly believe that if you put out positivity, you get positivity back.
Mhm.
I try very hard when I go to a store or I'm in a restaurant or someplace to always use people's names. If they have a name tag on them, always use their name a couple times in your small conversation with them. Find something to compliment somebody about: their fingernails, their glasses. What, oh, that's a great color shirt. That color looks great on you, whatever, because it makes people smile. And some people don't have a lot to smile about. So if we can brighten somebody's day just a little bit, it doesn't cost us anything. It's it's what we should do. And I think that's a really important thing in this world right now, because there's so much division and people are worrying about little things that I mean, some things are big, obviously, but little things that in 10 years isn't going to make any difference at all. I remember when I was in, I don't know if it was middle school or high school, and I was very concerned. We had just moved from Florida, and I was very concerned about making friends. And I didn't feel like I fit in. Well, I was at a new school in a new area, and my father said, "What are you worried about? You're not going to know those people in 10 years. Why do you care what those people think of you? Just be you. If they like you for you, fine. If they don't, well, you don't need them." And it just seemed like, yeah, well, that's a pretty good idea. And I didn't always follow that advice. And I definitely made some mistakes over the years based upon trying to make other people happy. But one of the wonderful things about getting older is that if you can learn from your mistakes, which I've always said, if you learn from your mistakes, it's not a mistake,
Mhm.
it's a learning opportunity. And as long as you don't keep doing the same stupid things over and over again, well, you can build on that.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth there about mistakes because you'd mentioned, having some mistakes in your origin story, but really there's so much that's been learned from those. And also one of the things I wanted to check in on there was really just for our listeners, Fritz Chevalier happens to be your father's name. It'll be confusing for our listeners because you married a man with the last name Fritz, but your father has the first name Fritz. He's my Pepe. I know him very well, and I can see him saying that to you. I want to go back to him and Nancy, your mother. Talk to me a bit about that, about how they showed up for you.
Well, they didn't come from wealthy families or anything. And my father's father died in an electrocution accident when he was 18. And so, and he had four older brothers that were kind of hard on him. And one of the reasons we moved to New Jersey was he felt like he couldn't compete with the brothers. He wanted to get a fresh start. And but we never lacked for anything. My father has said many times, "Oh, I didn't give you much of a life and everything." I said, "We always had a roof over our head. We always had food in our stomach. You always went out of your way to do things." My father, who loves to drive, unfortunately can't anymore, but he was always forward, never back. That means you don't stop any more than you have to. And when we would go on vacation with three daughters and a wife, the rest stops were a little longer than what he would have liked. But he would always stop at the historical markers because he knew that I liked history. And so even though it was against his nature to keep stopping, he would stop along the way so that we could read the historical markers. And I, I knew he loved me, but that really kind of proved that he loved me because it was against his nature to keep stopping. My mother has always been there. They've always been there for everything I've been through, holding my hands, being accepting, even when maybe some of the things I did would not have been their choice, but that's the way it goes. And so they've always been there for me. And now that they're older and needing more assistance, my sisters and I are trying to be there for them. And luckily, I had told my husband when we first got married, I said, the only thing I'm going to tell you that has to be done is when my folks get older and they need help, I'm going to be there. And he's been very good about rearranging his schedule and stuff lately so that I can be up there since my dad broke his hip and everything. So they all set a good example. My grandparents were very loving. They shared their stories. And Daddy always says, we come from a long line of love. And you got to pay it forward. So
and
that's what I try to do.
Something you told me, he said, not worrying about what other people think is actually very important in these moments, isn't it? Having your North Star of care and love for those around you. We've seen situations where people worry so much about what the community thinks that they really don't treat their own very well. And I've seen the exact opposite in your family, right? Where always you think about the person in front of you first. I've got lots of examples of when I was a 16-year-old in your household where I thought for sure I'd be grounded. And you and Mark looked at me, as a young adult who can make mistakes and learn from them and help me along. So, I've always been so grateful for that. It's certainly been a model for me. When I look at my young children and decide how to respond, I remember those things. I remember the kind of get back on the horse model. We can tell our listeners what I'm talking about. I'm happy to share a couple of the stories.
In fact, it's funny. Mark said he was over at our old house yesterday and he took the back way out and he said, "There's Hemma's mailbox."
Right. So we'll allow you to tell that story now that we've mentioned the mailbox.
Yes. It was Hemma's prom night and we had gotten her driver's license and she wanted to go up to the hairdresser to get her hair done for the prom. She was driving on her own and she hit the mailbox around the corner. And she was just mortified and we went over there and talked to him and he was upset. And after we got done talking to the people about fixing the mailbox, I said, "Okay, well, now let's go get your hair done so that you can get ready for prom." And she seemed amazed that we weren't grounding her or keeping her from going to prom and that we weren't angry. It was an accident. It happened. And it wasn't planned, and we'll remedy it. And that's the way it goes. Why get upset over spilt milk?
Well, and very, very kind, but also very wise of you, because that also left me space as a 16-year-old to just learn the lessons, right? To actually think more about what I would do differently next time and how to avoid that happening again. And
Don't
for
drink your
listeners,
orange juice while
yeah,
you're driving.
I was drinking orange juice. I spilt it on myself. I was looking down, trying to see if I should go back home and get change. And then I clicked a mailbox. So, yeah, there was plenty of room to learn the lessons there. And that was a psychological safety almost of, well, then you could, to Pepe's point, move forward, keep moving forward and figure out what you need to learn. Rather than maybe sulking about not being able to go to the prom or spending the day telling other people I couldn't go, whatever it might have been. I was really able to focus my energies on what mattered as well. So yeah, just one example of the many ways in which you supported me. I remember there were others where we had a party at your house and things got taken. You know, people came that we didn't know and they got taken. And again, you know, life lessons for me, hard for you and Mark, you know, in the circumstances to have that happen in your home. But certainly, again, the way that you treated me as a 16-year-old was as somebody that can make mistakes and learn. And I've never forgotten that. And again, back to paying it forward, my children will benefit. Those around me will benefit. The people that work with me will benefit. Motherhood has a way of teaching you lessons that are pervasive throughout life. And so I'm so grateful to you for that. And grateful to you also and your parents for bringing those lessons forward.
Well, it's been our pleasure. But you're talking about lessons. Sometimes I think people think I'm very weird, but when I go in grocery stores and I see a young mother with a child or two that she's trying to deal with, I always suggest this is what my mother used to do for us is use that time as teaching lessons. Tell each child, okay, you have these two things or these three things that you need to remember and you need to look for in the store that we need. And things like taking the produce and weighing the produce and showing them, okay, it's 99 cents a pound, you've got 2.5 pounds. How much are you spending? Just little things like that, that little lessons that can be taught at any moment during the day. We used to, I don't know if you remember, we used to do the traffic light thing where we would sit at the traffic light and the kids would have to say their name and address and
Ah,
phone number and then say, light, please turn green.
right.
And usually by the time that they got done saying all that stuff, which they were memorizing, the light would turn green and they thought it was magic, but they also learned their address and their phone number, which, is an important thing. I know when I used to substitute that children had no idea where their parents worked, what their home address was, and especially now with so much stuff that they don't have to remember because they have it on their phone or whatever. I think that's important. That's an important safety thing for kids to know. Just where do they live? How do you get to your house? You can do that in the car with the kids. Okay, now where do we have to turn to go to school? Where do we have to turn up here? Tell me where to go. It includes them in their life. It makes them see that there's more to it than just riding in the car.
Mhm.
And there's little life lessons that can be passed along every day. And children need to feel involved. They need to feel that they're part of something. And we can include them in a lot of little tiny ways every single day.
It's so important, Laurie. In fact, it reminds me that, you know, beyond being a magnificent mother to many, you've had many careers, and one of your careers was as a 911 dispatcher, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I remember you used to always come and wave me off if I ever left for an evening with my friends. And little did I know until you explained to me one day that what you were also doing was checking the type of car, the color of the car, the number plate of the car. And you explained to me that you weren't just being, you know, protective, controlling, any of those things. You were actually acting from experience, because so many times people have called you about missing children, whatever it might have been, without those details. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? And again, that's impacted me. I now do the same for my au pairs that I have. I make sure that I I search, I either ask for it or I look for it. But talk about that a little bit and how, again, those early experiences in your careers have impacted your approach to motherhood.
Well, yes, I was a 911 operator in Boca, and I worked for Florida Highway Patrol for about 3 years as a dispatcher. And every time the fair would come to town, on Saturday morning, you would have a lot of people calling because their child didn't come home. And we listed the accidents by the make and model of the car and the last name of the driver. And it never ceased to amaze me that these people that were trying to find their children didn't know the last name of the person that their child went off with, didn't know what kind of vehicle they were in or the license plate tag or anything. So yes, I used to go out and find out that stuff when you guys would go off, so that if God forbid anything happened, that I had the information that I needed. Um, just like telling people when you're traveling what routes you're going to take, so that if something happens, they have a place to start. A lot of it is just common sense, but it's things that people don't think about ahead of time because they haven't had that experience. And of course, they're worried and they're scared. And so they're not thinking as clearly as they should. So that's one of my little tricks of the trade, I guess you could call it.
I mean, parenting is scary. And, one of the scary things about parenting is that your kids will think you're not cool because, you bother about these things. And the other major scare is that they won't be safe. And so I love the way that you balance those two things. And you kept the respect of your children and they knew
Not
they could have.
always. There was some times, as you well know, that my children weren't that crazy with me, but you know what? They all grew up wonderful.
Yeah.
They all are. I always say nobody's in jail and nobody's on drugs, and in this day and age, that's pretty good.
Agreed, agreed. And look,
Pretty
yeah,
good
there is a
thing.
resilience again to motherhood, to your point, because it's not always rosy and it's very scary a lot of the time. And these strategies, no judgment if you don't use these strategies, just, some healthy tips to try if you need them. But yeah, I agree with you. Talk to us a bit about that, how you cope as a mother when it does feel like your kids don't appreciate what you're doing and it does feel like you're the only one putting out the effort. I think that's a common theme. We say women take on the psychological load, we take on the load of the home, whether we're working or not. And certainly you were doing both when I lived with you. You were working and taking on the home, and your husband was away in the US Navy. So talk to me a bit about the hard times and your approach to that to stay resilient during those times.
Well, I wasn't always resilient. There were a lot of nights that I laid in bed and cried, and a lot of letters that I wrote to my husband that I never mailed just because I needed to find a way to release the tension because it was a lot. He would be gone for 3 to 6 months at a time, and I had 3 or 4 kids at home, and I was running a business out of my home. I was selling, they used to have a company called Home Interiors that was decorative things for the home. And you did in-home shows like Tupperware shows and help people to decorate their home. And I've always liked that sort of thing. And it's nice to do it with other people's money. But yeah, there were times when I just did not think that I could make it. But I always found the help. At one point in time, I needed to go talk to a counselor for a while to help me to deal with things. And there's nothing wrong with that. When you need help, you need to ask for it. Most of us are too proud to ask, or maybe we're unfortunate enough to not have somebody to help. But yeah, motherhood is a bit. I mean, people don't realize you're on 24/7. If you're awake, and even sometimes if you're not awake, your kid's going to come in and wake you up. Maybe they had an accident in bed or they're sick or whatever. And it always seems to fall to, at least in the past, it's always seemed to fall to the women to pick up the pieces and put it all together. And that's what you have to do. Like I said, there were times when I really didn't think I could make it. I remember one time saying to my mom, when I was getting divorced from my second husband, I said, I can't take it anymore. I just wish I could just go into a room and be left alone. And she said, well, you can't. You got kids to take care of, and they need you, and you need to pull up your bootstraps and get back on the horse and get to doing it. And kind of that's just always kind of been the way I've felt about things, is you just have to do whatever it is that comes along. You just have to figure a way to do it. Uh, I think I told you the story about my grandmother who lived to be over 100. And one day I asked her about her success at longevity. And I said, well, what is it that you do? How do you stay the way you are? She says, well, I get up in the morning and I go down and I put the kettle on. She says, and I go and get the newspaper. And if my name's not in the obituary, it's time to make the bread. So that's kind of been my credo of, well, you, here's another day. You've got to deal with it. It's I had health problems because I was very nervous as a child, and I let things upset me. And the problems that I've had because of health problems I've had because of that have caused me a lot of pain. But now I know that I can't change those things, and all it's doing is eating me up. So I need to change my mindset on how to deal with it. And I definitely feel happy about it. And I think it's a more successful way of looking at life.
And I hear a lot of grit and resiliency in there, but I also hear a lot of peace of mind, and so I love that message that, pushing through isn't always the wrong thing to do. Actually, it can bring you true peace of mind if you have a North Star. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, definitely, definitely, because people spend so much time either feeling sorry for themselves or blaming other people for the problems that they have, and just sitting there, well, it's everybody else's fault
Mm.
or whatever. Well, if you want to change something, you have to change it. And a lot of times we have to start with ourselves and our perceptions of things, and maybe have a more open mind and try to look at what other people are going through. I tell the kids when they go to school, and there's always seems, unfortunately, to be one child that's either a bully or is always very unhappy, and maybe they treat their fellow classmates poorly because they're frustrated. And so I tell the kids, not every child has a loving, supportive family. A lot of kids go home and terrible things might happen to them that you can't even conceive because you've never experienced anything like that. So usually when people are unhappy or they're bullies, it's because there's something wrong in their life. So instead of being angry, try to be kind, try to be compassionate, try to be their friend, because you don't know what they're going through. And none of us know what other people are going through. A lot of times it's nothing that they're personally trying to do to you to be mean. They're just frustrated with the world, with their life. And instead of getting angry, maybe we need to try to look at it in a little different perspective.
I love that you teach that to your children and their children. It's so important, not just to be kind to others, but also to have a kindness that's inward as well, to know that the bullying might not be about you, it might be about them. And self-care and self-love is very important to show up in the way you do in the world. So may I ask you a bit about that? What do you do to make sure you're looking inward and having self-care and self-love so that you can then be there
Well,
for all these people?
it took a lot of years. I felt very guilty for a long time if I took time away from the family, even just to sit down and read a book, to
Right.
take an hour to sit down and read for a while. I felt guilty because, oh, I should be doing this, that, or the other thing. But now that I've gotten older and hopefully wiser, I right now I go to the I try to go at least 5 times a week, and I do water exercises and stretches, and I meditate. I just look out the window while I'm doing my exercises and try to clear my mind and just breathe. And it it has made me such a happier person, but also things don't seem to bother me quite as much as they used to. And so I truly believe it is important that everyone needs to take some time, whatever it is, if it's you play golf or you like to read or whatever it is that you take for yourself, you have to take that for yourself because otherwise you can't really efficiently take care of the other people who need your help because you don't have the energy. And so don't wait till you get to be my age before you start taking better care of yourself. To all mommies out there, that is very important. You will be a better person, a better parent if you're more rested and you have time to do something that you enjoy doing for yourself.
And your children and the people around them will benefit from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So important. Now, you've mentioned one thing you love to do is read. And I know that's a passion we both share. I think even on the first night that I arrived at your house, we looked at your bookshelves together. We talked about what we were reading. So I also remember, this is quite embarrassing. I think if you decided to pick another exchange student, you would have picked a British one because you love British history. This I know about you.
Yes.
And so it was a bonus when you did have me. You were like, oh, now I can talk about British history with this girl. And of course, you
Yeah.
knew a lot more than I did. So.
I remember when we came to visit you in England and we're driving around and I'm telling you all about the history of this
Yes.
area and that area. And you're like, I didn't know that. Yeah, I've always been a bibliophile, and British history has always been my passion. So I have lots of books on the subject, and I listen to podcasts now. When I drive, that's all I do is I listen to podcasts. It's 3 to 4 hours to go up to my parents all the time. So I don't talk on the phone. I just listen to different podcasts. A lot of them are history podcasts. Some of them are you know, like stuff you should know and other little off the wall things, trivia, a lot of trivia because I love trivia. And that's another form for me of relaxation is putting more information in my head. The more information I can get in there, the better it is. Every day you should be learning something.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be something important, but it can be something that can enrich you. Or, if I ever get on Jeopardy, maybe that'll be the final, I'll know the final Jeopardy question because I listened to it on a podcast.
Yes. Yes. No, I love that. And, that constant learning. And again, I want to say for my listeners, it's not that you are now a retired grandmother. You are a full-time carer still, not just for your parents, but also for your children and their children. So it's inspiring that you are making the time for yourself now with the wisdom that you must. It's a must and it's non-negotiable. And I remember watching Jeopardy with you and you answering every single question. And yeah, amazing just how much knowledge you've been able to store, but also again pass back on. So yeah, very, very exciting. And in terms of history, you are not just an avid historian. I know you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but you've worked on local history in your community. Is that right?
Well, for about 3 years, I was a tour carriage driver down in Charleston. I drove a carriage being pulled by two mules.
Nice.
So I can technically say I was a mule skinner, and because you had to wash the mules at the end of each day. And I would go and do these tours around historical Charleston. And the way they had it set up, they had certain areas that you could do the tours in and other areas that you couldn't, but you didn't know until you were given your assignment what tour you had to do. So you had to know all the history of the various areas. So I really enjoyed that because I think that deep down I might be a frustrated thespian, and that was my little stage for my 12 people that I could entertain and tell them some stuff about history, but also try to be entertaining and make people laugh. And then recently, I've been involved with the Berkeley County Historical Society. I was the secretary for that for about the last 4 or 5 years. And we have a lot of new people moving into this area and trying to get the history out to people who enjoy it, but also for the new people that are moving into the area that would like to know about this area. This area has a lot of history. I'm in South Carolina, and so we have a lot of Revolutionary War history and Civil War history and terrible things, slavery, Jim Crow, things like that. And I've always tried in my dealings with the Historical Society to make sure that all the various sides of history are told and exposed, that, it isn't just white Southern plantation owners that created the history of the area. There's a lot more to it. And trying to show people all the various different types of history and perspectives, and why things happen the way they are is because of what has historically happened before.
Right.
So, there's the old adage, if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. And we can see that happening in our country right now. So it's important that people realize the story behind things and the various different perspectives to try to have a better understanding of our history, but also our fellow man. I grew up during the Vietnam War, and I remember writing letters to the editor of the Palm Beach Post and poems and things like that to try to express my dissatisfaction with what was going on in the world. And so now I of course, my children are all privy to my feelings and my ideas, which is a little hard with my oldest because he doesn't, we're not on the same page, let's put it that way. And sometimes it's hard to be there and not bring up politics because I know that his way of looking at things is completely different than my way of looking at things. But we have to try, even though we don't agree, we have to try to be respectful and keep the peace. Conversation is so important, and there's a group that I'm getting involved with that meet up and try to come up with solutions instead of just complaining about what's going on. Well, what is it that we don't like, and what can we do differently to try to get our point across or fix whatever the problem is?
Laurie, one other thing I appreciate about you so much is your care for others. And now you show that in a physical way that you've always, even when I lived with you, you would put together care packages for your husband, but also for his colleagues. And I feel like every birthday, Christmas, whatever holiday it might be, we have a care package arriving at our door, even now, 20, 30 years later. So tell us a little bit about the care packages from the military onwards and why that's so important to you.
Well, when my husband was in the Navy, he was on submarines. And at that point in time, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have any way that you could physically talk to them when they were underway because they were submerged most of the time. And they had what was called a family gram, and you were issued 8 of these at the beginning of the deployment. And you could send these family grams that would be sent to the guys on the submarine. You had 40 words. The first word was their name, the last word was your name. So that gave you 38 words. You weren't allowed to talk about anything that might upset them. You just was supposed to be good news. It was supposed to be a morale booster that you sent, that they got this message about every week and a half or 2 weeks that told told them that everything was good. And they would have what they called a halfway night. Halfway through the deployment, they would have these boxes that their spouses or girlfriends or whomever had made for them, and they would all open up their boxes on halfway night and find all the goodies that were in there. And we put things that our men liked, by Mark it was Vienna sausages and bazooka bubble gum, and they're just different little things from home that they liked, candies that they liked, Reese's peanut butter cups, and just things to make it a little easier because it was hard for them being gone so long too. And of course, inevitably, when they would leave to go out to sea, something would go wrong. The
Mhm.
hot water heater would break, or the air conditioning would go out, or something. And it always seemed like within a week of him deploying for 3 months, something would go wrong. And so, okay, now, well, we got to deal with that. And so you did. It was just the way of life. Um, but it's funny because since my husband's been helping out so that I can be up with my parents lately, he said to me a couple of weeks ago, he said, I used to think it was harder on me when I was deployed because you got to be with the kids and the family, and I had to be gone. He says, but now after having to handle transporting the grandkids and getting them here and there and taking care of making sure that I have milk because he always runs out of milk. And, you know, all the thing I didn't realize all the things that you always take care of that I just assumed just showed up. He says, I think you had the harder job. And I said, yeah, I always thought that. But
Might not have said it, but we definitely knew it. Definitely knew it.
right.
Yeah.
So
Well, look, Meme, I'm calling you Meme, Laurie.
it's
You are
okay.
my Meme.
I,
You are
I
my
I
Laurie.
answer to just
You
about
answer them
anything.
all, Meme to many. It's funny that we end with that realization on Mark's part. It's not to say that his job wasn't hard at all, but it's certainly nice to see a realization of the type of hard it is to be a mother to many, even a mother to one, let alone a mother to many as you are. And again, you are the epitome of a care package. You are the whole care package. So I wanted you on this podcast. You know that this is called Unless, from the doctor's use quote from the Lorax. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And I mean, that's mic drop right there for Mother's Day and for you, Laurie. But let me ask you to any final words, any advice for mothers out there to show up in all the ways you've shown up and more.
I truly believe that when you put out good, good comes back to you. That when you treat people with kindness and respect, and that includes your children, that you listen to them, you put down your phone. I mean, I guess I was lucky. We didn't have cell phones when my kids were little, so I didn't have the choice of being distracted. But you brought these little people into the world, and it's your responsibility to try to make the best person out of them that you can. Uh, Schools try very hard, but schools are not their parents. You have to invest that love in them every day, even when they don't want you, when they hate you because you won't let them do something. Oh my God, I'm never going to talk to you again. Um, it's okay. You just have to let it go and just I remember one time Nancy ran away for whatever reason when she was a teenager, and she was gone overnight, and we didn't know where she was. And we finally called the police, and the police were at the house while we were reporting about her being gone, and she walked in. And the first thing that we did was hug her and say, we're so glad that you're okay. And kind of like with you in the mailbox, she was just astounded that we weren't yelling at her because what was the good of yelling at her? What we need to show her that we love her and then try to find out what it was that caused her to feel like she had to leave. Um, and sometimes with teenagers, those reasons are not necessarily very valid to us, but that we just have to listen to our kids and try to provide what we can, but also let them make mistakes because mistakes are learning opportunities. And we can't we can't experience everything for our children. We can't take away the pain that's going to happen to them because sometimes they have to endure that to learn how to be a more productive person and be inclusive. When I was a president of the PTA at one time, somebody said to me, because I had my one son is gay, and my daughter got pregnant in high school, and she said, "You have a gay child and you have a pregnant teenage daughter. How can you be president of the PTA?" I said, "Because I volunteered and nobody else wanted to do it. Just because you're involved in something that might be doing good doesn't mean your life is perfect." But all of those things that happened made me a stronger person, made them stronger people. And we always tried to be an inclusive home that all of their friends were welcome. When Alex came out, he was very afraid that his father was not going to think as highly of him. And when we were accepting of him, we started to become the neighborhood house for the gay kids to come over, because when they came to our house, they could be themselves. They didn't have to hide who they were. They could have a good time. And that was important, that everybody needs a place where they're accepted and they're valued and they're cared about. So
Well,
that's
thank you for opening your heart to so many, not just, as I said, your four biological children, not just more than four, five, six international students who wanted a home at that time, to your local community in Charleston and the tourists that come there, and then to all of your grandchildren, and then all of our friends that you're allowed to bring into the house. Your table was always open to even my friends and their families. So I don't know how many times you've been told thank you, but you should hear it. Thank you, Laurie. It's
well,
important.
thank you for thinking of me about this. I hope that in some way I was helpful to somebody. And thank you for being you and being such a wonderful part of our family and letting me share so many great experiences with you and the girls and Sean and everything. And that you are all precious to me. And I love you very much.
I love you too. Happy Mother's Day. And thank you for joining us
Okay.
on Unless the Podcast.
Okay. Take care. Love you.
Love you. Thank you for spending part of your Mother's Day with us here on Unless the Podcast. Today we honoured one extraordinary mother, Laurie Chevalier Fritz. But in her story, we see echoes of so many others: mothers, grandmothers, stepmothers, foster mothers, adoptive mothers, chosen mothers, mother figures, father figures, and caretakers of every kind. We also want to take a moment to acknowledge that for many, today brings complicated emotions. If your mother is no longer here, if motherhood has brought you grief or longing, or if today simply feels heavy, we see you. You are not alone. I feel that too. My own beloved mother, Indira, passed away 5 years ago. We were very lucky because she got to meet my girls, Jasmine and Eva. And though she's no longer with us, we still feel the magnificent legacy of love she left behind. She had a life well lived, full of care, compassion, and quiet strength, and I carry her with me every single day. I also want to thank my incredible mother-in-law, Sherry, who continues to pour love and wisdom into our lives. I'm so grateful for the way she shows up for her family, her grandchildren, and for me. So today we say thank you to the ones who mother us in all the ways that matter, to those who show up again and again with tenderness, toughness, and love, like my mums. To those who care a whole awful lot, we see you, we need you, and we thank you. Happy Mother's Day.